going to turn it over to our expert and our presenter for the day, Mr. Peter Bastone.
Thanks very much, Robin. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a brand new eBuy presentation. eBuy recently went through somewhat of a refresh, some of it technological, some of it interface-based, and you folks are the first people to see this new slide deck. So thank you very much for coming, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Today we're going to cover a basic overview of what eBuy is and how it's best used. We'll go through and actually register and set up an account in eBuy. Then we'll go through the process of creating and posting a sample request for quote. We'll modify it, we'll forward it, we'll tweak it a little bit. We'll go through the evaluation and award process. And then at the very end, we'll do some questions. Since this is a new version of eBuy, I want to spend some time talking about what is new and yes, also what is not new. From both a technological and design perspective, the new eBuy takes advantage of a lot of long sought after modern design cues and functions. We, over the years, have taken a lot of feedback from our users and done our best to incorporate that into the new system design. So for starters, a lot of the pages have been optimized for printing. We know that we're government. We know we still, even though we try to be as digital as possible, there are still scenarios and folks who absolutely have to have something on paper. So we have optimized eBuy for printing. We've also, and this is I think one of the biggest improvements, taken advantage of a new functionality called modals. In the old version of eBuy, a lot of the function required refreshing the page. But thanks to a new backend and modern design cues, we can now pop up certain toggles or selections right on top of the existing page. So it functions a lot more like most commercial websites, and it means a lot less time spent loading pages. We've also added some new elements to the PO creation process. Now, the creation of purchase orders is something we don't cover in great detail in most of these presentations, primarily because most RFQs exceed the dollar value that most buyers have on their purchase cards. But nevertheless, we have new APIs. We have the ability to use the same payment methods that are in Advantage. It is, of course, purchase cards only, not AACs or DODACs. And the purchase orders that are generated from eBuy, just like those from Advantage, go through the PO portal, which is a vendor-facing tool that vendors can use to download their orders, provide status update, and so forth. So I think that means no more faxes on the back end, which is a good thing. And also powerful navigation elements, nice broad statement there for anything not covered as a modal or a popover. So I'll be highlighting those as we come to them. But let's take a step back and talk about what eBuy actually is. We've rewritten the front page text from a specific description of how it's used to just a nice general marketing piece. eBuy being a powerful and intuitive acquisition tool that thousands of people within the government, within the military use to achieve required competition, get best pricing and value, and of course it saves you money. That's a nice way to put it, and that is true. I also like to point out, of course, that at its core, eBuy is a tool for posting requests for quotations against multiple award schedules, BPAs, government-wide acquisition contracts, and so forth. It's at its heart a very simple tool that allows the buyer to post requirements, send those out to the contractor community, and get quotes all in one place. And if it is within the threshold, cut the purchase order. When would you use eBuy? What would you use it for? Well, eBuy was introduced back in 2001 to address the growing need for services. We have alongside eBuy, we also have GSA Advantage, which has always been ideal for buying off-the-shelf products, but there was no tool for services, and services were becoming a bigger part of what the government was looking to buy. So eBuy was introduced to make it possible to buy services. You would use eBuy when you're trying to get quotes on services, of course, but also if you were trying to get volume discounts on items that may go beyond contract pricing. What do I mean by that? Well, if you were going to buy, say, 10 laptops, you might just go ahead and put that in a shopping cart. But if you were going to buy 1,000 laptops, you would probably want to try and compete that for a better volume discount. You can also use eBuy when you have a requirement that is a combination of a product and a service. The example RFQ that we're going to post today is for conference room design. In that case, we'll be purchasing some equipment for our conference room, but we'll also be looking to purchase the design elements. So a combination of products and services. If you're not sure you're ready to buy, you can use eBuy just to determine sources of supply. eBuy allows you to post what we call a request for information, where you wouldn't necessarily follow that all the way through to a quote. It just gives the contractor community the opportunity to reply back, look at your requirements, and say, yes, I provide this product or service. A lot of buyers who are trying to purchase something that is very specific, especially against the schedules program, where sometimes there's overlap or it's not always clear whether a specific nuance of a service is provided. The RFI is a good tool to help determine who out there can actually provide it. And finally, eBuy is not just limited to scheduled contracts. We have BPAs and we have government-wide activity contracts on there, so you can obtain quotes directly against contract holders who are participating in a BPA. As far as the volume of what's going through eBuy, like I said, eBuy was put up in 2001, 2002 timeframe. Since then, it's grown quite a bit. We have, in fiscal year 2018, more than 60,000 RFQs, which as an aggregate represent $15 billion worth of estimated awards, went through eBuy. Of those 60,000 plus RFQs, 11,000 of them were straight up small business set-asides. Those were completely set-aside small business. The average number of quotes per RFQ is 2.5. I bring that up because there's sometimes a question when it comes to eBuy being a little too helpful. Folks are worried that they will get too many quotes. I want to assure you that on average, the RFQ gets 2.5 quotes, so that should be just enough in most cases to meet competition requirements. Who are the top 3 users of eBuy? It usually rotates between some combination of the DoD agencies. So you've got Air Force, Navy, and Army in FY18 being the top 3. I also like to point out, though it's not shown here, that GSA in FY 2018 was number 10. We are within the top 10 users of our own system. We like it, we find it's helpful, and we walk the walk. So as far as the top 3 commodities that are purchased, it's always IT at the top with, I believe, around 25% of the total. I'll have to double check that, but it is a significant plurality of the spend on eBuy because eBuy is also so well suited to purchasing IT. Numbers 2 and 3 are office supplies and furniture. Now that's covering this kind of stuff at a category level. But let's look at some RFQs, some real RFQs that were actually posted. So of course, office furniture, that comes under office, like I said a moment ago. We saw RFQs posted for flat panel monitors and other peripherals. So again, that's probably an example of someone looking for a volume discount. We've seen RFQs for water treatment services and shredding services. So now we're getting into some interesting department-specific or procurement-specific services with perhaps more complicated requirements than just I need an HD monitor with a certain refresh rate. There was one for a Tai Chi instructor. I thought that one was pretty unique. I haven't seen anything like that recently, but it shows you the breadth of things you can purchase through eBuy. A crane suspended man basket. There was one for screws, nails, and staples, and I'm putting that one in here because inside the RFQ, the person who was posting this actually spent the time to lay out the specific dimensions and attributes of exactly each type of screw, nail, and staple that was required. It was a very well put together RFQ, and I wish I could show more detail, but of course we have to keep some degree of anonymity here. There was an RFQ posted for a cultural resource survey of a native village in Alaska. That one actually was set aside and was awarded. And there was an RFQ posted for a theodolite, which up until recently I did not know what that was. That is the device that surveyors use to conduct geological surveys. So really, all sorts of things can be purchased through eBuy, the schedules program, the BPAs, the GWACs at large. So let's get into it. If you're a brand new user and you've never used eBuy before, you're going to have to register for a user ID and password. If you are an existing user, or if you are a user of Advantage, it shares the same user ID and password as Advantage, so you could just log in. eBuy is located at www.ebuy.gsa.gov. You can also get to eBuy via a link from the homepage of Advantage, but if you want to go directly to the site, there's the URL. We give you on the homepage, the not logged in homepage, an overview of some of the benefits for just the system in general, and specifically to both the buyer and contractor community. We've got some scrolling news stories here. I mean, not so much news, but anything that we want to make emphasis to, point out directly. The job aid window that you see there, that can be helpful if you want another walkthrough of the system above and beyond what we're providing today. We've moved the help links down to the bottom. We provide the phone numbers for the GSA Advantage Customer Service Desk, for the Vendor Support Center, if you're in the contractor community. We also provide links to some other GSA tools that might help you with your eBuy experience. Of course, eBuy Open if you want to research RFQs, Advantage for off-the-shelf products, eLibrary if you're looking into sources, and the Acquisition Gateway if you want to find information on procurement or some other tools like Calc for doing labor rates. And the sign-in links, for those of you that remember the old version where they were very prominently in the middle of the screen, we've now streamlined the design and put the sign-in up at the top. It's much clearer now so that you have to actually click the button for the type of user you are versus before where we showed just 2 fields and you had to figure it out on your own. An example of the new technology and the new design, whereas before you would have to go to a separate page, we now pop the sign-in link right over the home page. I'm just magnifying that a little bit to see all the different things you can do here. Of course, if you already have your user ID and password, you would just enter it right in the appropriate fields. But if you don't have one, or if you have forgotten either your user ID or your password and need to recover it, or you want to register, you would click down here. So today we are going to register for a user ID and password, which will take us over to the GSA Advantage registration area. Our e-tools do allow registration for both federal and state and local government customers. Today we're going to be playing the role of a federal government registrant. We would click on the federal government radio button, click submit, and we go inside the member registration. Like most e-commerce sites, of course, you put in your details, put in your agency and bureau. Your email address is going to be your primary means of identification and logging in. Well, you can use your email address or your user ID, but you register all that here. Don't try to change agencies if you, that's a separate topic we want to cover at another point, but I know I messed up my profile once by trying to change my agency, so just a word of caution. And if while choosing your bureau, if you don't happen to see your bureau listed, you can give us a call if you think there's something that should be listed, but otherwise try to choose the best fit. Sometimes we group things together, and at this point in the system's life cycle, we believe we've gotten all of the relevant bureaus, but just in case. I want to direct your attention to one thing specifically down in the bottom half of the screen. When you register for eBuy, we perform what we call an email handshake validation. So the email address, like many sites do, the email address that you put in, before you can actively start posting RFQs, we're going to send you a validation link. So as part of this registration, if you do intend to do purchases on Advantage or create RFQs on eBuy, we need you to click the checkbox that's in the middle of the screen there. The reason that's provided as optional is there are some folks who do not have buying authority who just want to register so they can browse a little bit more deeply. But if you do intend to create RFQs, as I imagine most of us do, please make sure you click that link. You can also select your preferences for how you want to receive any status updates on any orders you might place. When you filled out all the proper fields, go ahead and click Register, and you will now arrive at the logged in version of the eBuy homepage. So let's take a moment to explore some of the other functionality that is now available because you are logged in. Up at the top here, we have an RFQ finder. We have a link to prepare a new RFQ. We have a link to the RFQs that you may have already created. We have a message center, and we have a logout button. Now the RFQ finder, I don't think we cover that directly in this presentation, but a quick mention of it. If you happen to have a specific RFQ number you were trying to find, you could just click that button and a little pop-up, a little modal will open up underneath RFQ finder where you can input the RFQ number. But for most of us, especially if this is the very first time, we're going to go straight to preparing an RFQ. So you can either click the button in the middle of the screen, or you can click Prepare a New RFQ up at the top, and you'll be taken to the first step of the RFQ creation process. Now let's think about all the things that we're going to do that go into creating an RFQ. As I mentioned, our example today is that we're going to be outfitting a conference room. We're going to buy furniture, we're going to buy screens, we're going to buy phones, we're also going to solicit design services. The first thing that one does when posting an RFQ is find the sources. We can do that by searching through categories, we can do it by browsing categories. Our goal is to locate specific contractors to whom we're going to send this RFQ. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to enter the actual requirements of what it is we're trying to find, trying to buy, we're trying to get a quote on. We're going to give it a title, we're going to put in details. If we have specific line items, specific UPCs or part numbers that we want to get quotes on, we're going to put those in. If we have attachments, maybe some schematics or design styles or a list of specs, we can do that. Any additional information like delivery, we're also going to put in. After all of that, we're going to receive and evaluate our quotes, and we're going to make our award notification online. So the first step in finding sources is to arrive at this screen where you have the option of either searching by keyword, browsing through categories by commodity, or browsing entire programs as a whole. If you want to do keyword search, you can do it here. Enter whatever keywords or even a schedule SIN, contract number, whatever you might happen to have into the search box. If you'd prefer to browse to these preset categories, you have that option. And if you want to look at a specific program as a whole, you have that option as well. Let's say you wanted to examine the multiple award schedule list. When you click on multiple award schedules, a list pops up that you can scroll through of all the different of the entire multiple award schedule listing. One of those powerful new design elements I mentioned earlier is the ability to toggle information. For example, to tighten up the list, you can toggle the descriptions of the schedules on and off. You can toggle them all, you can toggle them independently. It's truly amazing what the new platform and new design elements let us put into eBuy. And it's also very satisfying because a lot of these requests came from users over the years who asked us for this functionality. If you would prefer to browse through a specific category versus the program as a whole, an example of that would be clicking on our building and industrial category. you get a similar pop-up where you get the procurement-specific, in this case, it's schedules, but if applicable, other contract types. But today, we're going to start with a keyword search. So we're outfitting a conference room. I'm going to put in conference into the keyword search and click go. Now, unlike a shopping site like GSA Advantage or another e-commerce platform where you're searching against product description, eBuy searches against the description for the vehicle as a whole. In the case of the schedules program, that would be a schedule description or a special item number description. In the case of one of the other vehicles, it would be that vehicle-specific description. But my point is, whereas other sites you want to be very specific, like a specific UPC or item name, because we're trying to go from general to specific here, we want to start with general. So I'm just using the term conference and receiving search results that contain the word conference or conferences. The professional service schedule came up first, but as we scroll through the list, we can see some of the other vehicles that are there. We could also jump directly to one of the schedules or source. In this case, we have both schedules and GWACs, technology contracts, Alliance Small Business. But right here, as I scroll down, I see underneath the furniture schedule, there is a SIN specifically for conference room furniture. So I'm going to click the select button, and that will take me inside the SIN and show me all of the contract holders that have a contract to provide products or services under this SIN. Now before, you might remember I mentioned the importance of an average 2.5 quotes per RFQ and why there might be some people who are worried about that. The way that eBuy ensures competition is that any RFQ that is posted on eBuy is visible to any contractor who holds a contract to provide a service or product under the schedule or SIN or vehicle that the RFQ is posted. What that means to you, the buyer, and us during this example is that even though I'm only going to choose a handful of contractors to send the RFQ to, any one of the contract holders in the list or lists that we go through can log into eBuy through a vendor interface and can view all of the RFQs that are posted for them, for those areas. We know from our work with the vendor community, and I believe if we have some vendors on the phone, they may corroborate this, that a lot of companies will designate someone to go through eBuy every day and look at the new RFQs that have been posted. So that is the reason why I mentioned earlier that there is a possibility you'll get more quotes than you anticipated. But of course, that could be a very good thing. It shakes people out of a sense of complacency from maybe just going to the same 2 or 3 sources. And we've talked to buyers over the years who have said they were grateful that eBuy introduced them to a company that they might never have known existed had eBuy not been so transparent. From a policy perspective, that is also one of the ways that eBuy ensures competition and why it's compliant with NDAA and other acts on competition. So you can see the schedule and SIN that we have selected here. If you want to toggle the description off, there's a little link there to open the description. As of right now, we haven't selected any contractors yet. If you want to filter down the list, and in some schedules and SINs, the list could be hundreds of vendors, we provide a free-form text search here. This will let you filter down by the vendor's name, the city, or the state, but it does all of those fields simultaneously. So anything you enter in here, if it's matched in the name, if it's matched in the city or state, then the list will be trimmed to show only those that match the search string. We also have the socioeconomic designations on the left side of the screen. And the way these work is whichever one you click, or any one of these that you click, the results will reflect companies that hold at least one, but not necessarily all, of the designations you click. This was an intentional design element because users had reported back that sometimes they ended up filtering the list too much and couldn't go backwards. So if you select small business and service and woman-owned business, you will get all the small businesses, all the woman-owned businesses, and so forth. You can also remove them easily. So if selecting a combination ended up bringing the list down to 0, you would just be able to use that interface to remove one of the selections very easily, and it would regenerate the list as it was. And this all happens without reloading the page, so it's very streamlined compared to previous implementations of the same function. eBuy also allows you to do a small business set-aside, and this function has been increased in visibility and is also toggleable. So if you want to do a small business set-aside, you can click the yes button. By default, it's set to no. But the beauty of the new eBuy is that if you change your mind after the fact, or at least as you're going through the process, you can undo the small business. You can set it back to no. So it's nice and modular. You really have control over all the elements of the RFQ. If you want to do a little bit more research about the company about the companies in this list, you can click on their name. It is a hyperlink that will pop up another modal above the screen showing you their contract number, their contract duration, and other information about this company. I want to make one point about the location that these companies are showing. Part of the requirement of getting a scheduled contract is that you're able to serve at the very least the 48 states as a whole. So while with some services it may be tempting to only look locally, the address you're seeing here does not necessarily mean in all cases that they actually have a local office. This is usually a corporate address, so a company that may not be shown as in the city and state you are in could actually have a location nearby, or they should be able to service the area anyway. So I just want to make that point. You can, of course, resort these lists as well by clicking on the vendor, the header, the vendor header or the city-state header, and it will resort them alphabetically or reverse alphabetically. A word about the different socioeconomic types. If you want to see all the different types that eBuy shows, just click on this socioeconomic icon, and we pop up a modal with the definitions of each one of these socioeconomic types. They may be listed in the left, but the left doesn't necessarily show which letter corresponds to which designation. So we have this legend accessible right here for you to use. So again, small business set aside. If I toggle it to yes, it pops open a set aside selection where I can choose which one of the socioeconomic types I want to do the set aside for. Now it's important to note here that when you do a set aside, you can only choose one socioeconomic type. You will see the list change depending on which type you choose. And if you, again, change your mind, you can toggle the yes to a no. In this example, although I'm going to close the list here, we're not actually going to do a small business set aside. Pardon. So after choosing vendors, it will show me the category that I've selected and the number of vendors that I've selected. But as so often happens in complicated procurements, one SIN is not necessarily enough to cover the scope of what we're looking to procure. As I said, our example is going to include not just furniture, but design. So having already selected the furniture SIN, or the appropriate furniture SIN, now let's look for a design SIN. I'm going to click Add Category. It will ask me if I want to save the RFQ, and it will take me back to this selection screen. So since we covered this with a search the first time, I'm going to quickly cover it with a browse. We're going to go to the Furniture and Furnishings category. We're going to pop that up, go to the Furniture Management Services schedule, click Explore, look at the special item numbers. Oh look, Furniture Design and Layout. That sounds exactly like what I want to buy. Click Select Vendors, go through the same process here, add them to the RFQ, and now we're ready to move forward. Another powerful navigational element that I want to draw your attention to is the trail at the top of the screen. This navigation menu here lets you jump back and forth to pretty much any part of the RFQ that you'd been working on. So whereas previous implementations of this functionality were very linear and you had to jump back and back and back and then forward and forward and forward if you wanted to make a change to something you had done earlier, now you can jump directly to the part of the RFQ that you want to work on. So if you start filling this out and you decide that you want to add even more categories or you want to toggle the vendors that you've selected, you can jump directly there with one click versus having to navigate backwards and try to find the exact right spot. We also are taking advantage of refined icons to show completion. So you'll see that not just in the navigation element I'm highlighting now, but in the sidebar that we'll cover a little bit later on. When you have a check, you know that you have completed the element or at least filled it out enough to continue on. Some of these items there's not one state of done. There's like done enough, but you could do more, such as in the case of categories. You're considered to have completed selecting categories if you have at least one, but if I wanted to put 10 in there, I could do that. We also make it very easy to judge your progress through the RFQ as with this new side navigation menu. We show the different components of the RFQ creations screen here, and you can jump to any one of them. Some of them are optional. The attachments and the line items are optional, but each one of the remaining items, the categories, the info, the delivery, and the shipping address, there are required inputs. And eBuy will not even let you proceed past this screen if you have not filled in at least the required elements. You also have at your fingertips the ability to cancel the RFQ, save it to draft, or review and move forward. So let's take a moment to just go over the entire screen. Scroll through. Here are all of the pieces that you have to put in to do a complete RFQ. We're going to start with the RFQ info, and this, I believe, is what highlights eBuy's power and its simplicity. The first thing you're going to want to do is give your RFQ a good title. As I said, we have vendors who go through eBuy every day and look at what RFQs have been posted. You're going to want to give your RFQ a nice specific title that will help any vendors who are looking through it decide whether or not it's something that they might be interested in quoting on. You want it to be descriptive of what it is you're looking to buy. You also have at the top of the screen the Seeking Sources or Information Only checkbox. If you are not yet ready to do a full-on RFQ and you are just looking sources, as I mentioned earlier, you could do a request for information by checking that box, and your submission will have a slightly different visual cue that indicates to the vendors that you're just looking for information. You can put in a reference number or a UPID. The number that you put in that field will be visible to sellers, so don't put in anything that is proprietary, but it is helpful if you have a reference number. The description field, I believe, is one of the most powerful parts of the RFQ, and I encourage, because it's open-ended, and I encourage folks to use that to emphasize anything and everything that buyers believe the vendors might need to know. In some cases, that could look like reiterating your evaluation criteria. Oh, this will be based on past performance primarily. Or if you're looking to do brand name or equivalent, for example, you could put that in there. Anything that you think the sellers need to know in order to give you a good quote. And finally, you would select a close date. The default close time is 5 calendar days, but the absolute minimum amount of time an RFQ can be open is 48 hours. Now you want to give some thought here to how long you want the RFQ to be open. We understand that sometimes folks are working on a tight deadline, but if you leave your RFQ, if you make it close too quickly, you run the risk that vendors might not have time to quote. So think specifically to what you're purchasing. If you're trying to compete those volume discounts, maybe the vendor only needs 3 or 4 days to go through their catalog and decide what they want to offer. But if you are doing this conference room design or security services or auditing services or something more complex, you're going to want to give an appropriate amount of time for the quote to be reviewed. the request to be reviewed, excuse me. So here's what that might look like after it's been filled out. And then we're going to move on to the delivery section. eBuy offers 3 different types of delivery, each of which are appropriate to a specific type of procurement. For those volume discounts, just straight up line items, you'd probably want to choose the first one. Oh, please deliver this to me X number of days after you have received the order. But in the case of other services, you have 2 choices. Date of award to date of completion you would use when you are not sure exactly how long the service is going to last, such as in the case of this example. Whereas period of performance is when your services are being procured for a specific duration, a specific calendar date. So if you were buying security guard services for the month of, or for fiscal year 19, you could start them on 10/1, you could close them on 9/30. In this case, since we're not sure right now how long the design and building of our conference room will take, we're going to choose date of award to date of completion, and note that now these 2 sections have received checkboxes and we're ready to move on. Attached documents is another area where we really listen to our customers. The old eBuy just had one choice for doing a normal attachment, for doing one attachment at a time. That was the biggest pain point that we heard from customers. So we have modernized this interface to allow you to do it the old way if you want, and click the drop or upload files to bring up the classic Windows Explorer type file selection. But if you have Windows Explorer or another file manager open, you can select multiple files directly out of your file manager and just drag them over to the area and it will upload them. So thank you and you're welcome. Few notes about attachments though that haven't changed. Each document still has to be less than 20 meg in size, and the file name, you can't use certain special characters. So take care as you name your files and as you choose your files. If you run into an error, check the file size, check the name, give those a try. Cut files, zip them. There's certain file types, I'm not sure it's listed here, but there are certain file types that I believe you cannot upload. I believe you cannot upload an exe file. You can't, executables, batches, stuff like that. So you're going to want to stick to your Microsoft Office files, your JPEGs. In some cases, when we've had some users who are using the advertising schedule, and so they're having to upload artwork, and if you're using TIFF files or other large media, you can run into some issues there, as those tend to be a little larger than 20 meg. But nevertheless, the 20 meg size has worked pretty well for most RFQs over the years. When the upload is complete, you can click the button and it will appear in the RFQ. The file that you've uploaded will appear in the RFQ. And the attachment status changes from optional to complete. I'm going to jump ahead to the address because that is a mandatory item. These come from your profile in GSA Advantage or in the shared Advantage eBuy profile. You can create as many addresses as you want, and if you are a buyer who's managing multiple locations, it's usually to your advantage to load each of your locations into Advantage or eBuy, and then you can select them at this point in the RFQ. I'm going to jump backwards here to the line items. As I said, we had specific line items in mind that we're going to include as part of this RFQ. So we're going to put in some HD screens and we're going to put in some phones. The way you might go about finding these, so you may have them already from previous procurements, or if you're using GSA Advantage, you can just search for the items you want or the types of item you want, note down the manufacturer's part number and the manufacturer name if it's a specific product, and load them in here. Advantage even allows you to check out directly into an eBuy RFQ, but that is a topic we cover in a more advanced class. So at this point, we've filled out each of the sections of the RFQ, as well as the optional ones, and we now want to move forward to review our work. You click the review button, and as you see, it's all done. You go to the next, you'll get a modal that shows you your RFQ everything you've put in a nice, friendly format. If you need to make any changes at this point, just click the cancel button. You'll be taken, the modal will go away. You'll be right on the previous screen where you can just go edit the part that you want to change. But if you're ready to submit the RFQ, go ahead and click the submit button, and you'll get a notification that your RFQ was successfully submitted. So at this point, we're still collecting feedback. If you have any feedback, by all means, please give it to us. You can go to your RFQ page where all the RFQs you've created are stored, or you can go to the eBuy homepage and take advantage of some of the other functions in the system. I want to talk a bit before the RFQ closes about how you might forward or modify an RFQ. Another powerful element of eBuy is its collaborative element. You can forward RFQs and you can change RFQs so long as they are still open. If you click on the My RFQs link, which you could have done from the previous page, you could have done from the menu on the top of the logged in homepage, you will arrive at a listing of all of the RFQs that you have either created or finished out. eBuy shows you their statuses, so it's very easy to look and see which ones are still open, which ones are in draft, which ones are closed. Click on the RFQ number and we'll take you inside the RFQ where you access these different functions. You can forward an RFQ, you can modify an RFQ, you can send question and answers, or you can go back to the list. So first, let's forward an RFQ. This feature has remained pretty constant throughout eBuy in all the different implementations. It's a simple forwarding interface where you put in the recipient email addresses for all of the recipients that you want to receive the RFQ. Now you have to give the RFQ a password. That is a mandatory field. You would put in all the email addresses here, separate them by commas, and any comments that you want to make about this RFQ you can put in this field. I have to point out here that the intent of this function, number one, is only to share RFQs internally, not externally. By that I mean, don't use this function to send an RFQ to a contractor contact because the link that is generated will not be accessible to them. And number two, any recipient of the RFQ will have the same access rights that you as the creator have. So if you forward this to someone on your team before the RFQ has closed, they will have the necessary permissions to cancel it or modify it. If you forward it to them after it has closed, they will have the ability to make an award notification. Why might you want to forward an RFQ? Well, sometimes the subject matter experts who write the technical requirements don't have the procurement authority, or vice versa. Sometimes the procurement official doesn't have the technical expertise. So eBuy lets you collaborate by letting individuals do the part of the RFQ that they are most qualified to do. When you're ready to forward the RFQ, after you've filled this all out, click the Forward RFQ button. Q&As and modifications are very similar. A Q&A is just if you've gotten a lot of questions that you want to make sure you address for the benefit of everybody, a best practice is to use the Q&A function. It's a similar interface to the attachment interface. You would put your question inside a document, question or questions, and your answers. You would upload them, and they will appear in the RFQ much the same way an attachment does. The significance of that function, it helps prevent potentially unfair situation if you are not giving information out to all of the potential quoters. And anybody who is looking at the RFQ, not just the companies that were originally invited during that first wave, will be able to see your Q&A document. If you want to modify the RFQ, now that could be changing the close date. It could be adding additional contract holders, or perhaps changing the delivery date. You would click on Modify. We would ask you to input a reason why you're modifying the RFQ, and then we give you access to this interface we showed you before where you can change the part of the RFQ that you're looking to change. You'll then get this confirmation and the RFQ will be modified. So let's say now that the window has passed, the RFQ has closed, and it's time to make an award notification. You would log back into eBuy, and you would click on My RFQs. You would see the RFQ. When you go into the RFQ, you will see all the quotes that you have received under that RFQ. In this case, in this example, we've gotten 2 quotes, and we would click on the quote ID of the quote we wanted to look at to evaluate what it is the vendor has given us. Now, it's important to note that you can log into eBuy and look at quotes prior to the RFQ closing, but you will not be able to make an award notification until after the RFQ has closed. So if you're anticipating a high volume of quotes, looking at them before the close date could be a good way to manage workflow, but the vendor does have the ability to modify the quote as well. So if you look at something early on, you're probably going to want to give it a look-see closer to or after close so that you can be sure that you're seeing the most current information. This is a very zoomed out picture of the entire quote. We've got the vendor information. We've got any attachments they might have provided. If we asked for line items, we have the quotes that they've provided on those line items. So yeah, vendor information, line items and comments, and any notes that we might want to put about this quote. Now those notes the vendor cannot see, so you're free to put in anything you want. When you're ready to make an award notification, scroll to the part of the quote where the Award Notify and Do Not Award Notify Vendor buttons appear. These buttons will only appear if the quote has not expired. Just like you can put in a close date for your RFQ, vendors can put in a close date for their quote. If you find yourself in a position where a quote that you did want to award has expired and these buttons do not appear, you could potentially contact the vendor because the vendor does have the ability to change the quote expiration date. When you've gotten to the quote that you want to make an award notification to, you click the Award Notify Vendor button, and you'll be taken through an interface to provide notification. I'm using the term award notification for a very specific reason. eBuy itself, at least going through this interface, does not cut a PO. It does not bind you contractually, at least not in the same way that going through the formal procurement PO process does. What you're doing here is you're sending the vendor a notification that you intend to make the award to that vendor, and in most cases you'll have to do the logistics offline. Again, this is because usually most RFQs exceed the dollar value limits that people have on their purchase cards, so they have to make other arrangements. We give you this chance to put in a brief message for all the vendors to whom you are not intending to award. The value of this function is that if you it helps you manage keeping the other vendors in the loop. Of course, these folks are usually pretty anxious to find out whether or not the RFQ they submitted a quote on went to them. So it's a best practice to follow through with this process, and that way they get information, and if they want to understand a little bit more about the procurement, they can contact you. But usually just having the information, just having the closure that the RFQ was awarded to whichever company it was awarded to for whatever amount, usually stymies the deluge of phone calls you might get. After that, you will see that the status of the quote has been changed to reflect who was awarded and who was not awarded. And I will briefly cover the PO creation process. If you want to create a purchase order, click on Create PO. You'll be taken inside a purchase order creation interface where you can fill in any missing details, and like I said, the purchase order will go through and appear to the vendor via our vendor PO portal. We give you the ability to reissue an RFQ in the event that you need to perhaps perform the procurement again in the case of a routine procurement, or if you didn't get any quotes and you want to make a minor tweak. When you click the reissue button, we preserve pretty much everything except the close date and possibly the attachments. So it makes it very easy to go back through and reissue an RFQ, make a few changes, but it's going to be pretty much ready to go. It will get a new RFQ number. We do not reuse the same RFQ ID. Otherwise, if you're done with the RFQ, click the Archive button and it will appear in your personal history. So to summarize, we went through what eBuy is, how it's used, we registered an account, we created an RFQ, we did modifications, we forwarded it, we made an award notification after we evaluated the quotes. So at this point, that is the presentation, and we now have time for questions. Question number 1, how has the user interface changed for contractors? Is the new look and feel fairly similar, or are there changes we need to know about? So because we're following Agile design principles, we started out by applying these new designs to the buyer side. The next phase that we are planning on would be to address the vendor screens, but as of right now, we're trying to tie up all of the development on the buyer side. So the vendor phase would be the next thing that we would look at. So for the time being, these have not made their way over, but hopefully in the near future. Question number 2. Can I explain the RFI process more? I wasn't aware that an RFI/SS was a capability. It's not that different, and actually let's take a note to get a screenshot for the next round of presentations of what it looks like when an RFI is created. Really, all you're doing is clicking, as a buyer, all you're doing is clicking that sources sought box, and what the vendor sees is a little bit different. What the vendor provides is a little bit different. So let me actually say for this one, I think that's an opportunity to expand the presentation to include those screenshots. If memory serves me right, the vendor in that scenario wouldn't go through the full informal quote process, but I want to defer until I can get the exact screens. We have a question about someone who signed up in Phaetos but didn't get a reminder. Hopefully, but seems to have made it to the presentation, so same boat as some of the folks I mentioned this to earlier. So I hope there is a process for getting them credit. Next question, were any of the updated PO creation features or pages tested with GSA's ITSS/assist tool? Yes. Yes, they were. Next question, is the limitations on subcontracting clause included when you choose small business set aside? Okay, I will have to check into that one because I remember in the previous version of eBuy there was language that was appended into the RFQ when you choose a set aside. We're going to have to look into that one. We're going to have to look into that one. So let us get back on that. You're looking for a specific clause or just general text? We'll look into what, if anything, is put into the RFQ when it's set as a set aside. Next question. I've downloaded the presentation deck, but I'd like a member of my team to hear the actual presentation. Will the presentation be emailed out? Robin, that one I'll have to defer to you.
Yep, I'll take that one. So short answer is no. The presentation will not be emailed out. We do record these webinar sessions from time to time for future use, but we don't have any intention on emailing this particular one out in the near future. There's a handful of processes we have to do to make them fully compliant with various regulations, so it's kind of a lengthy process. So no, the short answer is that no, this one won't be emailed out. at any point in the near future. And now it may be made available through GSA Interact or maybe on the main GSA website, but unfortunately, no, we won't be emailing you a recording anytime soon.
But we do offer these trainings quarterly, and there is some flexibility. If there's significant enough demand, we could look into something. I don't want to speak for David, but I think that is a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. All right, next question. Can you use requests for information to reach vendors to invite them, say, to a conference? You're asking if you could post a request for information effectively as a means of communicating with the vendor. Do I understand that correctly? Oh, I've never gotten a question like that before. Seems like if you did that, you would be putting an RFI together that, I mean, technologically, maybe you could, but don't think that was the intent of the RFI capability. Another follow-up question, might there be a presentation similar to this one when the buyer side has been modified? I'm guessing you meant the seller side since you asked about the seller side before. And yes, in the past we have absolutely offered vendor training. I myself have done it, and there'll be other trainers who do it. So yeah, certainly. We want to show it off. We want you to see it. I mean, that's win-win. Next question. As a PTAC, I am eager to get small business to be on GSA and also to receive eBuys. Since many or most must use the all eBuys in SIN option in order to see eBuys in their SIN, is this process still in place? There was no mention of the all in the presentation. If you're referring to the button you can click when you're going through the vendor selection process that says select all in vendors, okay, let me take that feedback and I can add that to the presentation, because you're right, I didn't call it out, but it is still there. It is still there, if that was your question. We generally, it's schedule specific whether a buyer would want to click that button. Of course, in the case where there are a handful of vendors on a SIN, 8, 10, 15, 40 maybe. But when you get into some of the IT SINs where there are hundreds of vendors, it may not be as advantageous. And the rationale is because vendors who are invited have the opportunity of responding with what we call a no quote. They can basically say, I don't offer that product or service. And in a very broad SIN, if you're looking for a specific requirement, but in a broad SIN, and you select a lot of vendors, you are likely to get a high number of no quotes. But yes, it is still there. Next question, are number of RFQs or RFI responses kept with a specific requirement in eBuy? I'm a bit confused at what's that asking. Are we talking about a count? Forgive me, I'm unclear about what's being asked. Perhaps a follow-up could be submitted. Can an RFQ go out to multiple schedules or only to multiple SINs within the same schedule? Oh, absolutely, yes. RFQ can go out to multiple schedules. I believe I actually did that in this presentation. We did the furniture schedule, we did 71 and 71 2K. The specific items we were trying to buy fell under one schedule, but the design services fell under another. But yes, absolutely, you can do it among multiple schedules. Now, when it comes to some of the other vehicles, like BPAs, And GWAX, I think it's a little bit more complicated on what you can and cannot mix. But if you're just talking about schedules, yes, you can. I think we have a repeat. This is a repeat. You're welcome. Okay. Follow-up RFI question on reaching vendors. I think an outreach session. The question is, the follow-up to the previous question is the individual in question is having a specific event and only wants to invite certain socioeconomic vendors. No, eBuy shouldn't be used as an invitation system. That's not what it was designed for. But if you are looking to get a list of vendors, we recommend using eLibrary. You can perform some of the same filtering of the lists in eLibrary. You can even download as an Excel sheet the entire vendor list for an individual schedule, and you could get your invitees there. So hopefully that would help. Are the quotes shown in the quote response window sortable, say lowest cost first and the ability to sort out no quote responses? Believe to some degree there are. What gets challenging in some cases, we've seen people use RFQs to set up BPAs. And so it's possible to get quotes that have $0 value. I myself actually got to participate in an RFQ where we were setting up a BPA for video conferencing services. So the solutions provider basically gave us a special price list, and we wrote a BPA off there that anybody could use to get those special pricing, but the RFQ value itself was 0. So while it may be possible to some degree, it may not always be practical. That is something we'll have to try, though, whether we can sort out the no quote responses. All right, I think that looks to be all the questions we've received.